Pues yo llegué a México sin conocer a muchas personas y realmente a partir de la maestría surgieron muy buenas oportunidades laborales con las que en realidad soñaba incluso antes de empezar la maestría. Una de las cosas que aprendí en la maestría en vivienda es a no entender la vivienda de la forma tradicional, moderna, que es la compartimentación de los espacios domésticos, sino entenderla a partir de dinámicas familiares, de otros tipos de habitantes, una vivienda entre roomies, cómo es una vivienda para una abuela y su nieta. Un cambio que hubo en mí fue como una capacidad de sorprenderme en cosas que normalmente daba por sentadas. Mi nombre es Bettina Rincón y estudié la maestría de vivienda en CENTRO.
Definitivamente, después de haber estudiado diseño urbano, veo la ciudad de forma muy distinta. Veo sobre todo, pues, qué se puede mejorar, ¿no? Cómo cambiando pequeñas cosas podemos hacer una mejor ciudad. La ciudad siempre está cambiando y eso se tiene que reflejar en el urbanismo. Espacios en donde nos sintamos a gusto, en donde podamos convivir, cómo lo que ya está hecho lo mejoras, que motive a la gente a salir de su casa y realmente a generar comunidad. Soy Esteban y estudié la especialidad de diseño urbano en CENTRO.
Yo me quiero dedicar al desarrollo de viviendas sustentables y me siento muy feliz. Creo que sí estoy en la carrera correcta, definitivamente. Me encanta lo que hago, todas las cosas que he ido descubriendo de mí, de la gente a mi alrededor. Creo que lo que tiene que hacer la arquitectura es dejar de resolver por el camino fácil. Pues creo que podríamos aprovechar mucho mejor el agua, la energía solar, la luz natural, el calor natural, hacer de la naturaleza nuestro cliente principal.
Listo.
Bueno, bienvenidos a esta conferencia del ciclo de prácticas de arquitectura. Da cuenta, ¿no? Con la tercera hoy está con nosotros Auböck Kárász, del estudio de paisaje con sede en Viena. Son arquitectos los dos, dirigidos por María. Auböck y János que han destacado por la realización de proyectos urbanos, semipúblicos en toda Europa, donde la naturaleza funge como la base de sus diseños. Arquitectos, paisajistas, a veces el paisaje forma parte de su proyecto de arquitectura, otras veces
medio centímetro, menos.
de otros arquitectos y obviamente pues, demuestran esa arquitectura, digamos, que trabaja sobre un territorio muy hecho, muy diseñado, muy armado, de alto. Hay que recordar que en términos de vivienda colectiva, Austria ha sido pionera ya en los años 20 del pasado siglo, hace ahora 100 años, pues estaban los proyectos más interesantes que algunos ya quizá estemos hablando.
Sino también los van a pasar por ellos, como era la Kalmarshof y alguna serie de proyectos de vivienda colectiva, entendiendo que el mejor modo de tener una sociedad justa es teniendo todos una vivienda digna. Y a partir de ahí, de esos años, el tema de la vivienda se fue desarrollando, se empezó a acotar, se empezó a entender qué tan pequeña podía ser una vivienda, porque es muy fácil decirlo.
Cómo puede ser ese espacio de calidad mínimo. En ese sentido, bueno, por lo menos, y eso queda una cultura durante de vivienda, digamos, social, que ha sido los estándares de vivienda. Entonces, cuando ellos hablan a veces de vivienda colectiva, de vivienda social, quizá a veces a nosotros nos puede parecer que no es algo tiene un trabajo realizado
¿no? Pues la integración de esa condición urbana con el paisaje, la incorporación de la naturaleza a la ciudad, ¿no? Entonces, desde esa perspectiva es muy interesante su trabajo. Entonces, bienvenido, very welcome to be here. We are very glad that you could share your knowledge, your experiences, and your projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the nice invitation. We are going to speak parallel. At the same time, we are going to present.
Limón, as you say.
Yes. And we are from Austria. It's a country about 1/3 of Mexico City population. We have a lot to tell you, but you will see, we will show you small, medium, X-large projects, because landscape is whatever there is a sky, is what Catherine Gustafsson is saying.
So we like to work on very different. Dann gehst du zum nächsten.
Ja, bis heute nicht.
Oh, bitte.
No. We just have take some time with the technique.
Yeah, we try.
Here we are. Okay. Thank you.
Da drückst du.
So, okay.
No, no, va benissimo.
What we show you is some images from our landscape to tell you about the high mountains. We do have snow. We do have heavy. Semi-detached housing or singular family housing. Well, and mobility, how to go on in future in time of climate change. Du musst mir es zeigen. Ich kann es, okay. I think, Janne.
Its dimensions, its proportions are changing continuously. The maintenance of the landscape is a part of the design in a certain way. Then public space is of course open for everybody. This seems for everybody. And for us, landscape architecture has really a very strong social impact. The next aspect, which we regard very essential, all these projects are full of paradoxes, full of contradictions, and the question is how we approach these contradictions. We are convinced it's often the best way to deal with these paradoxes. And then we had the chance in the last years to work on a field which is called landscape urbanism. Because we think that the role of landscape in the urban development is becoming more and more important in the future for sustainable development of big cities. And innovation we try to achieve by typological experiments. A lot of our works are typological experiments in the sense that they work with contradictions, which usually are not used or unusual, but we think they give a chance for a quite essential thing for us. We learn to design for functions, but in reality, what we do in landscape architecture, what we regard as essential is behind the functions. So we actually regard our work like composing partituras, no? We have slow and fast parts, we have silent and loud parts, and we have music elements, so to say, which will happen in the future, but we design something which has to be open for this. This is different as a concept of flexibility. Is very rural and we are going to show you in this context.
So here we are in the vineyards north of Vienna, and the landowners for many hundred years work on the land, as you can see. And one of the landowners who owns top of the hill wanted to have be the gazebo, a meeting place, a piece of artwork. So here we are with our project, and we teamed up with a very well-known sculptor, Mr. Zovanek, who created a huge steel sculpture there.
So the idea was at the same time to fulfill the wishes of a vine grower, of a vineyard cultivator, and to place an element into the landscape, which is in a way an artistic intervention. And the idea was that in general, the building is the architecture which prevails. We always take away a piece of landscape, and the idea was here to build something which becomes landscape again, which becomes a piece of nature. So we have a slope. Yes, we have a slope here.
And 2 levels of terraces, and this offers the general view in a frame, so like we know from Chinese landscape architecture, yeah?
And on the slope, we put this building on the slope between the 2 levels of vineyards. And the lower level, you have this, what Maria said, a framed
vision.
Landscape. And on the upper level, you see that what you always see, but from a different point of view. And we have a little
So the
stair,
construction is made of steel columns and wooden decks, and of course railings. But I think we have, here we are.
You see here the slope. We have, of course, cleaned it up, as you usually do when you do a piece of very little piece of architecture. And the idea was that this is going to grow in future, and it's sort of overwhelmed by nature. And you see here this in the ground part, you have this frame view, and in the upper part, you see it from a different point of view. So it starts to grow. We even made a wine cellar here on the left side. The pointer unfortunately doesn't work, but no.
And later, plans took over.
So this is a kind of a wine cellar where this wine grower can present it. The idea was that he is going to present his best wines to international clients on this gazebo.
So after finish, the son of the landowner made a entrance party with 300 people, and from then on they used it quite regularly, and plants are steady, watching chances to grow.
Now nature sort of prevails, and it disappears in a way. So it's a metaphoric statement, and today we have achieved a state where you almost can't see it anymore. You have to, when you go inside these platforms, you have to discover the view. You have to conquer the situation.
Actually, there is this Austrian architect and well-known professor at California, Christopher Alexander, who wrote this wonderful book, Pattern Language, and one sentence he wrote was, whatever you do, it will grow back into nature. So you have to learn the conditions, you have to learn your plants, your vegetation, your landscape, and how you react with your object, because it's a dialogue. The next project we are going to show is downtown in the center of Vienna.
So in Austria, we had this terrible pogrom at the beginning of the Nazi regime in 1938, when one night 25 synagogues were destroyed. And this is one of the synagogues. It's a little bit in the outskirts of Vienna. And it's a very sad history. They laid fire, and the beams of the roof fall down, and the Jewish population of this area, there was a big Jewish minority in this part of Vienna, had to clean up the beams on the next day. And 70 years later, they made a competition of a remembrance site for this terrible event.
Well, actually, I want to add that the synagogue, the building you see, is designed by one of the important professors of Technical University Vienna, Mr. Karl König, and it was completely burned down. But beside it, the Jewish community had a kindergarten, they had a gymnastic school, they had various social institutes. So some years ago, some family members from Chicago returned and looked for the gymnasium, and that was the kickoff, because the graphic designers who were renting the gymnasium called the city of Vienna and said, you have to do a memorial. This is a real memory of the communal work, of the communal life.
But the challenge for this task was to create a remembrance site, which at the same time serves as a public space for the population of this neighborhood. But the point is that we don't have any more Jewish population there, but you have a Muslim population today. You have even a Muslim youth club around the corner. So it's a completely paradox situation, and we did this work with two artists together who are specialized for mosaics, and you will see how the solution is. I just wanted to explain you that the site itself is just 47 per 12 meters. So it's really small, and there are 7 trees which were planted in the 1980s, and we have to respect these trees nowadays. Trees are considered like human beings, we just can't cut them. And this is a piece of social housing which was made in the 1960s, but the site of the synagogue, which was exactly here, this is a remembrance site.
So there are layers and layers of overbuilding.
So what are the layers of our design? On the one side, we have these 7 trees I mentioned. We have made this research about the beams, as I told you, that as a result of the fire, the beams fall on the ground. We have a layer of beams as a elements in concrete. You will see how it works. We have mosaics, which deal with sujets of Jewish religion, which at the same time are important in Muslim religion today.
Fruit, vegetable, fig,
but even elements like energy drinks, which are youngsters use today, and Coca-Cola or something like this.
And pack of cigarettes too.
So bridging the situation of today. And then we have, of course, you see a section and you see the final site plan.
So these are prefabricated beams in a dark anthracite color.
You see it from above, and the idea was that this is at the same time a kind of a cry for that what happened. It's a graphic design, but it's organizing a space, and it at the same time also furniture. which you have there. That's how it looks like. These beams sometimes arise from the soil, sometimes they go inside.
Happy enough, we have various colors of sand, so we could order this curry-colored sand.
And you have an explanation what happened there, but actually nothing else. And you feel that there are other rules as in general. And the fascinating thing is that the young people who use the youth club around the corner, they are really silent on this space. And I asked them why. And they said, this is like a religious space. So they feel something which we hoped to communicate, but it really happened.
Yeah, because there is a text on a big wall at the end that explicitly says what we are telling you now, so people know.
And here you see these mosaics we are talking about. This is sujets from the two religions and which also correspond with everyday life.
Well, and it works in winter, in the snow, it works with rain. It's good for all seasons to meet. And for us, it was very impressive that the youngsters from the culture club, from the Muslim culture, they called us up, hey, go there, the dogs are destroying your design. Hey, come back, you have to clean up. So we had some sort of relation with the neighborhood during the opening of this.
We have presented this work in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, in the university, and we were a little bit concerned how the reaction would be. The interesting thing was that students liked it very much because this remembrance site is abstract and not as realistic as very often still these kind of remembrance sites happen. And I think that this topic is in a way very actual in contemporary times, as for instance in Argentina or in Chile or even till today in Spain.
So we go on now into downtown, and we have done various projects in historical landscapes. This time it was the competition for restoration of a Jesuit monastery for, oh, I'm sorry, I'm too quick. This is for Salzburg. Yeah.
This is in the heart of Salzburg. You must imagine that this city of Salzburg is almost half of the city is a UNESCO heritage site. And we have this famous church of Fischer von Erlach, which is one of the most important architects of Baroque period in Central Europe. We have the building of the Salzburg Festival Hall here, which is a very important festival of music and theater.
And this is the house where Stefan Zweig lived, the Austrian author.
And this is the old university, which is still used by the university. And this open space in the center used to be the botanical garden in the 18th century. And then they changed it in the 1970s for a completely uninteresting green site. And there was a competition on invitations, just with 5 landscape architects, international landscape architects, to design a park in the historic, the medieval, Renaissance, Baroque center, where there was no tradition of parks in the
But there
sense.
are the patios. Moment. Here you can see various courtyards. So we, in our project, wanted to deal with this, and especially the city of Salzburg. This is rich city because it's called Castle of Salt, and for centuries they were importing and exporting salt. It was a big commercial thing. And the city of Salzburg had a donation of a German artist, famous artist Anselm Kiefer, and this box-like building was also part where to relocate it.
So what you can see here, what María mentioned, that these green spaces are always courtyards of monasteries. You have only framed gardens there, but we don't have a park in the traditional sense. So the question was, how can we find a design idea? How do we approach? What is our reference field? You see here, we have these framed gardens. that's what we can find today. This was the situation, the original situation from the 18th century. This was this
70s
garden from the 1970s. And our idea was to work with this frame concept. But the frame today is a pass, is not anymore a wall, but is a very large pass. So you have to consider that this is a rather small area. It's 2,500 square meters. It's not more. So these passes are 6 meters wide. You can sit, you can walk, you can gather there. And we have 2 lawns, which are 27 centimeters lower. So it gives you another feeling of space. 27 centimeters in an open space is quite something already. You can feel it. And we have trees, sophora trees, and we have in homage to the Salzburg Festival Hall, we have these hedges, which are like scenography within the park.
like in garden theater.
But what is important now for you? Because I was talking about the contradictions and the paradoxes and how we approach towards a solution. So the students of this faculty, they wanted to have a special furniture for the students. The festival hall wanted to have a stage where they can perform. The Liberal Party of Salzburg wanted to have the biggest playground area they have. And our idea was to create an empty space, which is a sophisticated empty space in which different kind of events can happen. We show you how this looks like.
Moment. And we proposed and placed a piece of art, this pavilion of Anselm Kiefer, between religion, church, theater, music, art.
So these areas, which are the central access areas, access passes, they are paved with natural stone. These are gravel passes, and this whole area is covered by gravel. You see these sunken lawns, and you see this scenography. This is actually a sculpture park with few but very chosen sculptures of international sculptors.
So the frame of the linden trees also relates to the castle on top of the hill. The hedges relate to the entrance of the Faculty of Medicine, and the placing of the sculpture is located in this
and
hedge
these hedges
garden.
are always overlapping on the path, which is a little irritation. It's a little bit unusual, but it's still it works with the historic ambience. Now, what is important now? The Salzburg Festival has performances there. The students like it. The tourists go there, but we didn't design functions. We designed a reduced space, and in this space, different events, different situations, different moments of everyday life can happen.
So there are a lot of fine details, and that's something we take great care of, to have a good stonemason, have a good functioning. And underground, there is a wild torrent running, a river, yeah? And so we have also shown above on the gravel the flow of the river. We have at night a lighting concept, and we have some fine detailing how to create ramps and steps. You will see it was used immediately, but we had 2 meetings with more than 300 really crazy neighbors. No, we don't want this. Oh. János is very diplomatic, and we managed that. Soon as it was finished, it was taken over, and there was silence.
In our country, it's like that you have to, each planning process is a participative process. We have to deal with very different clients, and we have to react to their wishes. And to do an empty space is a dangerous thing. Politicians don't like empty spaces. They like a lot of functions which they can open and can produce in the media.
So here it
that's
is.
what it looks like from above. You have these large passes, you have the sunken lawns, you have this square with a sculpture behind the church. And this is a new design in the World Heritage area. This is not easy to introduce today.
Well, and now we are returning to the Jesuits.
So the next project is, we just finished in last December. This was a competition together with architects for the Academy of Science, what is like the Colegio de Mexico. This is for the community of scientists, Academy of Science, because they are the lack of space and they are going to use a part of this Jesuit monastery in future. And there was a neglected open space. Nobody knew this space. It was a very bad condition. And we, in the competition, we were the only one who said, well, we have to use this. And it should be also a public space. The idea was to create a meditative space for the academy, which is at the same time a space for the public.
So you see, this is our cathedral, very close, very few open patios in this area. The concept for the competition with Riepel Architects we made with a water feature
So we had
and a
very
pergola.
It was a little bit like the concept for a monastery garden. We had a long water feature. We had little squares to sit.
And you see how it looked like, really.
And we had a long pergola because this part is still used by the Jesuits, but that's what it looked like before. So nobody has used this area in the last 100 years.
So our proposal was to pass through, and the architects had the great idea to open this arcade, because you see it was closed 200 years, but through this opening there is an interaction of inside and outside in a very
So at the end
interesting-
we had to reduce the project also for financial reasons, as it happens so often. So we had a little square and we had this green area as you have it here in your school, which served there for the Academy of Science.
Actually, the faculty wanted to have space for 200 people to sit in a convention to listen to a lecture.
So this long bench is actually the border between the Jesuits, the area which still the Jesuits use, and the other side used by the Academy of Science. So we did actually at the end, again, very little, but this little work is very sophisticated. And this is underbuilt, but still from the 18th century. So we didn't have enough soil, place for the soil, so we made these furniture, which at the same time incorporate for these little multi-stem streets. We also designed the
Entrance area.
entrance area in the public space of the street to give an impression of, or like a visit card for the academy. And here you see again.
It's a place to meet, to pass
So
through.
now it's really like a secret space for the public, but it's a meditative site, so to say.
Okay.
Now we are going to show you two examples of social housing. Austria has
Vienna has a long tradition.
Has a long tradition of social housing. This is the most iconic one. You might have heard about it. This is the Karl Marx Hof from the 1920s. And we had this incredible concept, which I think could be very interesting also for Mexico City, that the middle class and the upper class in the 1920s and the beginning of the 1930s paid a special tax, which was used for the poorer part of the society to create new housing. This is a big housing complex of the 1970s. This is even a kind of a high-riser, which is a very interesting social housing, and this is just a building from the last year.
Okay, and about in the 1980s, the politics of Vienna decided to reduce program of social housing and enhance subsidized housing. That means teaming up with companies, teaming up with teams of entrepreneurs. Because
so perhaps we explain it like this, that we have till today competitions where developers, cooperatives, housing developers team up with architects, landscape architects, structural engineers, and economists. And they are in competition for a certain site. And then when they win, they have to guarantee the price of the building for this site. So this is a quite incredible thing. And till today, so that all subsidized housing over a certain dimension has to follow this typology. And you see that this project was the first one which was not initiated by the Socialist Party, but by the Green Party.
I just like to add, after the build opening use of the housing, 5 years later, the City of Vienna clerks turn up for controlling whether this was all done in the proper way, so there is no way to cop out. And this is useful to show that in the beginning, some of these housing competitions on top of it had some social issues. And one is housing without cars, because we have in our law for every flat 2 cars, garages. So with the money which they did not have to use for building garages, we were able to build roof gardens. So there was a change in the budget.
So, but this is interesting that this social housing was initiated by the Green Party.
And you have 2 parkings for each flat, like a big flat, or is that a method?
It's like a minimum of...
No, now we arrived at 1.2. 1.2 cars for each flat. So this is a site plan. We have a courtyard with a pond, and we have a courtyard with a hill, and we use the roofs. All roofs have roof gardens.
Actually, it was done again, 157 families. Again, it was done with a group of already existing, like 120 people already on site. They were actually controlling for the biological products, whether they did not like styrofoam. So they went on Sunday on the building site and said, we are the future tenants. We want to have a clean building site. And we had a group for the green, and we had a group for the child play. So they were taking part in the design process.
What I explained you at the beginning is that time is like a building material. So that's what it looks like when we design it on the computer in the studio. It's sort of implanted to centimeter exactly. And that's what it looks like 10 years later. But the important thing is, of course, landscape is not so wild in Austria as it is in Mexico. But this population wanted to have it as wild as possible. And their concept was as maintenance as little.
Well, possible. Because they had a deal with the city that they will do the maintenance themselves. And therefore, photos 20 years later is really lush, thick vegetation. So you see now how the weeping willow is on the pond. You see the sunken courtyard, which is good for parties, for the repair of the bicycles. You see some details of
what is nice about this project today, architects all over the world try to make architecture green. We are quite suspicious towards this greenery. But here it was really a conceptual thing by a special population, and they wanted to achieve this kind of sustainable architecture.
And we can prove it works, because this is like 20 years earlier. And on the roof gardens, we had some roofs with vegetables, and we had the idea, these prefabricated guys, to enhance them, we can make them out of concrete. And they really liked the idea of vegetable of concrete. But 10 years later, the tenants even used their old bathtubs, everything, just to make tomatoes, peppers grow.
Yeah, the next project is much more recent. It's 3 years ago. We have won the housing prize of Vienna together with 2 architects. And we had the chance to make the layout, the design for a common space in this area and to work on this central site and to make the master plan for the outdoor spaces in general.
This case, you can think about 1,500 flats. It's real big.
Big for Austrian conditions.
For our country. And actually the competition for the central core was quite interesting because we had the program that the fire department has to go through, the police has to go through, how to manage not to make a traffic-oriented landscape, a landscape that is enhancing and connecting. And that is the word il flottant, in fact, is a sweet dish, which you call in Mexico postre, of vanilla sauce and white dumplings. And that is what János
but the idea was, of course, these floating islands. This is also a kind of sociological concept behind. I just wanted to tell you, as we had 8 developers here, we really invested in playground. I think we have to invest in children. That's very important. They are not the last thing, the playground, but they were, in a way, the main thing here. We have this concept of public space, semi-public and private, which is a kind of a sociological trap, which we still move inside. But today, when you walk with your earphones, when you talk into your iPhone, public and private in the traditional sense don't really exist anymore. So we created not passes as we used to it, but we have sort of floating islands. And when this pass-like situation becomes larger, there's always a communal use of the ground floor. So they have, let's say, a meeting place there, or they have some sport areas or some cultural areas. Then it becomes larger in the layout.
So on the photos, you won't see color of plants.
You can see it better what this floating.
The photos are made in winter, but it gives you the texture of the arrangement. And we like color-coded plant design. So these are blues and purples. You have to imagine there are peppermint and lavender plants. So
here you see it 3 years later. So the vegetation is, of course, dense already. And here you see this rather large sculpture for the playground. And you have this sort of private feeling within this communal use space. Yes, the next 2 examples we would like to show you is from a field which we call landscape urbanism. The first one is the central station of Vienna, which took us 15 years till from the master plan till the more or less the end of the
detail
constructions.
And interior, yeah.
So here was one of the main railway stations of Vienna, the Southern Railway Station, and you had all the tracks in this area, and the city decided to make a new central station. And today the big European cities have very little land to offer for housing, always less and less. And these areas of brownfields or railway areas are the last ones which are really large and can be used for new housing projects. And the idea was we teamed up with an architect and had the chance to win the master plan. It's actually, from the layout of the city, it's still a rather traditional concept, but the idea was to place a sort of a central park into the middle, and these building sites should have interesting internal courtyards, and there should be a transparency and a connection between them. But the city has closed exactly this idea because they wanted to sell it. It's better to sell than it's single elements. So it's very difficult to carry through in a period of 10, 15 years a project like that. It's going to change, and we will show you as the next project what happened here. This was a new competition, and we changed the master plan in this area.
Anyway, after this urban planning decision, first prize, the architects built the train station, and we concentrated on the next step, the office buildings.
Our idea for this park was that with the concept of sustainability, we have sort of group of dense trees, groves, little forests, so to say. We have a complex path network with a special landscape of ornamental grasses, and we have ponds, sort of larger water sites. This was the idea for the master plan. And then, of course, when we meet reality, this area became smaller. There are no ponds. They made a competition for the park, but as we have won the master plan, we couldn't build the park, we couldn't take part in the competition for the park. But at the end, a Swiss architect has won this competition. And I think it's nice to see that they really realized a very large green area. And you have to imagine that each of these building units are a result of a competition for social housing. And this part at the beginning of this whole area, which I spoke before, there we have changed the master plan. We teamed up with a very good team of architects, Henke Schreieck from Vienna, and we could win this. This is a headquarter for the largest Austrian bank with 4,500 collaborators.
And the bank decided to choose this location, which is on the fringe of a working class district, to make a symbol and a state of education on this special traffic junction. Interior-wise, which might be interesting for your colleagues from the interior department, there are no single rooms any longer. Each working person can arrive with their piece of paper in the morning and choose their working space. So we were told after opening, they were so interested on views into the courtyards that they arrived even 7 o'clock in the morning.
So the idea was we had a park from the turn of the century around 1900, and we wanted to prolong this park into the new site.
So it's very favorite walkway to go to work and back.
So we have, on the ground floor, we have 5 of these atria. We have a public space, a plaza financed by the bank, so it's actually a public-private partnership. But the highlight of this project is actually a 7,000 square meter large roof garden over the second floor, which serves for the collaborators of the bank, for the workers in this bank, and has also an event location which is open for a limited public in certain situations.
For this floating park, we chose pine trees and Japanese cherries. So the photo on the right above you see is about April, May. The photo on the left above is like late August, September. And down below the 2 photos, they show you the courtyards, the patios. Yes.
You have wooden decks where people can gather and work together in outdoor spaces, which is of course in Austria a little bit different as here, because you can do it in spring and in summer. In winter, it's a little bit more cold here. And that's what it looks like 5 years later.
And turned out that people started to work on the meadow, in the courtyard. They meet there. This is the Passover, where you can reach the train station.
So
People
this
like
is
to
these
use.
plazas I was talking about before.
There are nice restaurants there. And this is a night.
So it's really very interesting because you have this feeling of it's almost flying, this platform. And it reached such a density after 5 years that it's really a park-like landscape over the second floor.
In the end, we even contributed to the indoor planting, and it might be interesting for you. It's plants from Mexico. So what you see here now in the office are locations which we did even call them Acapulco.
No, because
For the people
those
too.
plants you have in Mexico are exotic for us and grow only inside. And today it looks like a jungle, but the bank doesn't allow us anymore to make photographs. So we worked in this project from the master plan to the indoor greenery of the bank. So as a last project, we are going to show you the Central Park Baku, which we worked on in the last 7 years. It started with a competition for a park in front of a building of Zaha Hadid and Coop Himmelblau. Baku is on the Caspian Sea and is famous for its oil production. It was the first site in the world, first country in the world where they had an oil production.
So I like to add to this, in our language, if we translate it, Baku is the city of winds. It's a very heavy climate, very cold in winter and very hot in summer. So plants have real stress situations. On top of that, in the soil geological situation, oil is appearing. So if people build building sites, they have to care for some oil wells turning up. So the really medieval city is here. And then, because this is a nationalized issue, oil industry, the local Baku people, even in 19th century, invested the income of the oil to build opera, museum, gymnasium. They really built, as you can see, like a Paris quarter, yeah? So they really built a city. And in the 1920s, they had some German engineers to create this shoreline, yes. And they had a concept by German landscape architects to make green belt system. Only then they were really intelligent in the machinery of the drilling and pumping of oil. When Soviet Union took over, Azerbaijan had 3 months of democracy. It's a bit difficult to explain, but it's between Russian Tsars and Soviet Union.
So what is important in this area here,
yeah,
so-called Soviet, they call it, this is really a flat housing for a very poor population, but it was not favela. It was just very poor. You can find similar situations in Mexico City. But these buildings, this period of Soviet housing or of the oil workers is regarded today as a situation they want to demolish, they want to overcome. And as I told you, we have won this competition for this park, and then we were invited to develop an idea for this area. And we found out that other colleagues from Spain, from Italy, from France were also invited. And this, in Baku, we have a kind of an authoritarian regime. It's semi-dictatorship. So it's not easy to work in this ambiance. But somehow we had the chance to win with an idea where we wanted to make a little bit of social housing and create a central park.
I'd just like to add, because this is an aerial view, that in the time when we were working, hundreds of skyscrapers evolved. So I was speaking about 19th century, but what you see here is 30, 40 flats high, floors high. You will see it in a moment.
But not interesting skyscrapers as we find them
Well,
in Mexico City.
in a way
but
post-modern.
medium skyscrapers which are rather ugly, but they are appearing like mushrooms in the city.
Well, depends who is hired. I mean, there's a Sir Norman Foster.
Now the
working
story
there.
was, in an abstract way, we were asked to develop for a first phase a concept for an area more or less like this. That's a national theater. Here you have the large mosque, which is the biggest mosque in the Caucasus area. And while we were talking with our client, our customer,
Negotiated
with the Ministry of Finance, the street authorities
of the city.
have built 2 highways with 4 lines, each of them with 4 lines. So we suddenly stood there and we didn't have a whole area anymore. And each of these strips is something like 70 or 80, between 70 and 80 meters large and 500 meters long. And all the area is in a slope of 10%.
So besides that, you have to imagine now you have a slope. There is the largest mosque in the Caucasus. They got the grand idea to build into the slope underground garage 4 floors high.
So we had to deal with these elements. And of course, we could have said, we don't work in this context. It's enough. But I think our chance was to create something for the people who live there, to offer them a green space, a landscape, which they never had to use like that.
So János,
but the first task was that we couldn't cross these streets. They couldn't cross to go from one side to the other. So we had to create some kind of bridge. And then there was this, what are we going to do from the bridge to the mosque, where the garage is under it. So it was a real challenge.
And that was the topography. So he created something you call croissants. That is, you see, formed earthworks to create less noise and spaces for lawns where you can be by yourself.
No, the idea was, of course, we had to hide the cars in a certain way. We had to create a situation where you could stay and have not the feeling to be in the middle of the highways. And this works only with topography. And now happens something very, very interesting. As I told you before, that we like to think not only in functions, but in spaces, so to say. And there was no program on the side of the customer. This was a great thing. They told us, we want to have a central park. It was like a political issue. So we created different kind of spaces. We have a Platini Square, which bridges these highways. We have these Belvedere hills with a special view. We have open meadows, like you have it here. We have sunken lawns. They are a little bit deeper. We have something like a natural theater. And in these special kind of topographies, certain functions can take place, but we didn't design the functions. I think this is very essential. And we had, of course, you will see, we had a second part, but also to bridge a big already existing High Line on the other side. So again, the whole area is on a slope of 10%, and it was, of course, necessary also for disabled people. That's why we have these kind of serpentine passes. It's not just a formal play, it needs to be like that. And here you can see how we sort of hide the cars. The cars are behind it, the highway is behind it. There's a kind of hill.
So this is now the landscape plan, and it's actually a well thought of concept that imagine the blue trees and the turquoise trees are shielding the traffic. The red plant beds that form like a frame for the lawns, and we chose the regional tough climate-fit plants. We learned a lot about the vegetation of Turkmenic countries because we had to select plants that are sturdy in hot months and keep snow. So it's on the verge to have the olive tree. It's difficult, yeah? But it's also possible to have Morus alba, that is a tree you have in your country with black berries. So it was quite interesting which selection we managed to choose. Evergreen, like Lebanon cedars, etc., form important vistas.
And they don't have nurseries, so we call it, I think, viviendas in Spanish. So we had to import at the beginning the trees even from Italy, and then we imported it from Turkey. And in the last project phase, they could already grow trees in Azerbaijan. So this was the existing situation, and they wanted to demolish it. There was no chance. We wanted to keep certain elements where we said certain houses are part of the memory. We would like to keep it, but it was a political decision. It was completely impossible. And then, while we were negotiating, they were building these streets. And at the end, we will show you also in a little video, it looks like that.
So the next step was, this is now a grand view that you see again, the National Theatre, you see the mosque, but this is all sports for the young people.
So this
Sports
was already,
park.
the ministry didn't plan to do something here, but we have convinced them that when we do all that, it's also worth to go on there. So it's actually a wild way of planning, and we had to change all the time our concept, but at the end, we could realize a lot. And this we will show you now. This is a so-called forest park. It's even steeper. There are 14% slope. This is the mosque garden, and we are just working on this space. And the interesting thing is that usually building architecture, you gentrify a site. The site becomes gentrified by architecture. Here it became gentrified by landscape. So it's possible that we can't realize the last phase because they are going to build there. They say it's such a nice site, it becomes developers are full of ideas what to do there. And at the end, it might be possibly, we are planning a large lake there, but it can be the case that it will be never realized. So you see one of these strips. It's really, for them, it's a completely new offer. It's something great that they suddenly have a central park in the middle of the city. And of course, also from the ecological point of view, it's a big step. This is a bridge which is crossing this other highway, and you get through this spiral, you can get into the park area. This is a bridge which is bridging these highways. You see it underneath.
These are the walks. People go to work via the park. It's a big qualification now to connect the living quarters and the center of town, offices, etc.
Concerning the planning process, we designed the guiding details, but we couldn't do the detailed planning. And there was a Turkish general contractor who was always sending us his details. We corrected the details with our details. At the end, it was much more work than doing the detailed planning, but this was the only way to do it. And here you see, for instance, this sunken field, and they have the tradition of these little gazebos where they gather and families sit together and make picnic. This is the square over the highways.
And all the sports fields are colored in a different aspect. So you even, for memory, you can say, let's meet at the turquoise playground. It's in summer, it's a very hot climate. So these fields are used way into over midnight.
But we could really invent where to do sport, where to do gym, where's a playground. So on the one side, we had this big pressure of the quasi-dictatorship as a political regime. On the other side, we were very free in acting. This is a plan of the whole area, Maria.
Well, I just wanted to say we presented to you these areas. János, now he will speak about Forest Park, and this is in the making. And what we actually managed, we built a modern mosque garden.
We are just working for this area. We have planned a big lake, but the lake is not going to be realized because in the last moment, the politicians were afraid that the mullahs of the mosque won't like when people are semi-nude in front of the mosque, and the lake should happen now in this area, but as I told you, it's probably not going to be built anymore.
Let's wait and see. So for the mosque garden, we oriented in a geometric language pattern the central axis with a water feature, meeting at a large fountain area, little walks for meeting, for contemplation, and the color scheme is, lavender color, the roses. It's sturdy plants who keep in the heat, and you see the color changes over the seasons. On both sides of this longish garden, we wanted to plant cypresses, and we ordered them 4 meter high because of the transportation costs and because of the cars. So János has to explain what happened.
So this was actually the only part where the needs of the client were rather concrete. We had to keep in the traditional layout of a mosque garden with some sort of contemporary inlays. And these cypresses were on the rendering, they had more or less this height. But we have planned them in this height.
We ordered them
in this height. And to show you what I mean with an authoritarian regime, when they were planted in this height, the Minister of Finance told me to come to Baku and had to fly there, and he told me, look, in the rendering, you have the cypress trees are much higher. So they tied them off, and we had to plant new ones, which had exactly the height of the rendering.
But as this is Baku, the city of wind, like this, every tree now has a partner, a little fixation.
They are fixed now with, they are fixed with a wire. And this was the last element which we have of the park at the moment. Last phase, which we have finished in December. The slope, as I told you, is still more steep. It's 14-15%. And we have again these serpentine lines because it has to be able to, people have to reach it, also disabled people. And there is a central long stair. And on the plateaus of these stairs, we have again these pavilions and gazebos. It's very interesting that they have a tradition of pathetic layout. This is a part of their history, and they need this. We have to find a compromise.
But we did something for innovation reasons. This very, very long staircase is planted with trees. So you walk along the steps under the canopy in the shade.
And again, these gazebos, as I told you, this is now a different type of gazebo.
They are traditional picnic
like 20
areas.
Of these elements, and we could plant 4,500 trees in this forest park. And you see how small they were at the beginning, and they are already growing very fast. We invested again in playgrounds. You see these medium high rises I told you about. And of course, we managed to introduce a new feeling, which especially for young people, it's really a great adventure to use these parks. It's really a special offer. This is on a weekend. People are playing chess. It gives you an idea of park life.
People love to picnic.
Yeah, and now we would like to show you this video.
Thank you for listening.
Which was made by the client, not by us. It's very important. As they sell it, so to say, what they managed to do in 20 months. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great, great work. Congratulations. I have a couple of questions. One is related to the red material that you use not only in that project but also in another project that you shown before.
It's a wonderful question. Yes, it's recycling from car tires, colored in a variety. You can have like 40 pigments, and it's used because it's soft.
Okay.
Yes, people don't hit their knees. It's good for sport.
The red color is the only one which survives. The other colors usually change the color. But I speak with Maria.
Yes, yes, it's okay. Thank you. I don't know if
But that's
in Mexico, maybe it has another
yeah.
company's name.
It's a trainable material.
And two more questions related, but I think that this image could show that how you cut the existing city like this. You cut just the axe of a street, so you have a front.
So this was a political decision, and there was a little street. The street remained. And they said it's going from here to here.
Okay.
This we had to accept. But our original concept was for the whole area, and then said we start here. So we had to be incredibly flexible because the client changed continuously his ideas, possibilities, what they could offer us.
In fact, you now saw how we speak together. And so it was about working together, our team. We were asked for a master plan of 7-8 stages, but every week the program changed. That I'm the one to like to work, okay, I have the program, but János was the diplomat to go there and say, hey, let's wait 1 month more and we can make up a plan. We always had to deal with a very tough partner. They said, when I said, you have to start nurseries, you have to start garden culture. In your country, you need education for handicraft. They said, we don't have time. we need your plan in 2 months. Because they are very growing. It's a country that with lots of young people.
What is really interesting about this project, that usually you have a competition, the ideal case, you have a program, you fulfill this program, and then they start to reduce the money, the budget. Here it was different. They made a clandestine competition. They have chosen, for whatever reasons, they have chosen us. And there was no program. We invented what we would like to do.
We made proposals, and they said,
And while we made proposals, they built these streets. So we had to deal with this. And we had to make a lot of compromises. But the general goal we had was always to offer something for the people, which is a consume-free space. It's really a social concept, if you want, like that.
Well, and my last question is related about to what you mentioned before, that related to gentrification. Architecture means to produce gentrification?
No, but if in such a site where you have these poor buildings, usually the case is they destroy them and developers build high-rises, these medium high-rises, and the area becomes more and more expensive. It's going to be completely gentrified. Perhaps not in a positive sense, but it's going to be gentrified. Here happened exactly the opposite.
Okay.
We are very sorry for the fact that they destroy everything. There was no chance. But by building this landscape, a gentrification happened, because now the developers say, no, you don't go on here. Yeah. This becomes a rich area.
It's not our issue to start gentrification. But in all those years when we work and we climb out, like we are the agents for beauty. That's his quotation. János says, we are the agents for beauty. People step in and said, oh, couldn't we please build a high-rise here? So we have to say, no, not yet, not yet. And someone else starts up, oh, maybe a hotel complex here. So it's all about planning. And
can you imagine what it means in a dictatorship to convince the Ministry of Finance not to have any building site there, not to have any housing there, in this sense, it's an exception.
Okay, thank you very much. Any question?
¿No? ¿Preguntas?
First of all, thank you for having us here at the university. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Juan Pablo Marroquín. I studied architecture at the Universidad La Salle. Nowadays, I'm president of the architects there, and it's an honor for me to be the link between the academy, the university, you students, colleagues, and these fabulous landscapers well recognized in Europe. Recently, less than 1 month ago, I believe, the Republic of Austria gave to them an award, the Hans Hollein Award, that is equivalent of Pritzker Prize in Austria. So let's clap them. Thank you. And thank you, María and János, for being here and sharing to us all your work, all your advices, your presence, and come back soon, please. Thank you very much. Auf Wiedersehen. Vielen Dank.
I hope we stepped in time. And thank you for the good question. 2 months ago.
Oh, yeah, very good. Great.
So, I don't know, working in Azerbaijan, which, okay, in order for me to not ask an obvious question, Azerbaijan was a communist country before, no? So it was ruled by the Soviet Union? Sí. Okay. working in a country that was priorly ruled by the Soviet Union. I don't know, I think of places like Berlin, Budapest, which have architectures that are very general, very uniform. But then these countries, they're not communist anymore. They're kind of getting westernized in a way. So how is working with that contrast like? Because I don't know, in Berlin, I see a lot of things that it's very obvious, like this was the Soviet side and this was the Western side, no? So that balance, how do you work with it when, I don't know, making such a big project?
Well, our project is a part of this renewal, so to say, because those medium high-rises you see all happened in the last 20 years after the Soviet period, after that Azerbaijan became an own nation, an own country, what you see there.
Yes.
And now, of course, from the Soviet period, you have this working class housing dwelling, which we consider interesting. We would change it in a way, but we would keep it in a way. But there was no chance to do it, and this is a part of this new political development. And what happens usually is that speculation, a building speculation starts, and the whole area would be full of these kind of medium high-rises. And we saw that in this situation, on the background of a possible sustainable development, it would be interesting to introduce something else. For instance, the Italian team who took part here, they wanted to build much more. And then there was just very little green, and then the investors were very glad.
Okay.
But we somehow managed to convince the politicians not to do it. But we are exactly in this transformation period. And now they are sort of proud to make a step in this sustainable development. They sell this project as a sustainable development in a central site in Baku.
Okay.
I add something shortly.
Yes.
I expect you to be an architect student. Is it so?
Yes.
Yes. So you might be interested in style and change of style and habit of architectural construction and all this. So we spoke about the rather French style 19th century architecture. Yes. Now, believe it or not, this was built in Soviet Union. This was built in Soviet Union time, and there is a sort of classicism which you can look into in books and research now. The Soviet Union had very good architecture schools. There is some, you might know, Lisitsky and all those utopian architects. Mm-hmm. What happened was that when the oil boom started, a sort of postmodern style, be it a bit kitschy, a bit overdone, you know. You saw a lot of cupolas stepped in, but most of these buildings built of natural chalk stone. That is a local, real precious stone.
It's covered with natural.
So interesting enough, these buildings are built of natural stone partially and concrete, but you see the beige color, it's a sort of a texture of a city. It's something like the like language of the city, yeah. And this to follow and this to work with is quite interesting, as in some countries, style is setting in and changes a city. We, being so shortly in Mexico City, are very interested how modernism has survived. No, it's part of your genetic code. You do it today. Because in some of the Central European world, we had a postmodern turn, yeah? And to go along and go ahead is teach, go on, design, and try to find the language of the future.
It could be very interesting in Mexico City, for instance. What can you do in those brown fields? What can you do in former industrial areas? How can you transform it? But it's, of course, very rare that this happens in such a central situations. And for us, in this whole very particular setting, it was important not to follow a certain style, not to follow a fashion, but to do something which we were able to do with a general contractor, a big Turkish firm, and which is in a way timeless, that it's going to be good or serve the needs of the people even in 20 or 30 years.
And is surviving the life in the city. That's really the story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, very good work.
Pues yo llegué a México sin conocer a muchas personas y realmente a partir de la maestría surgieron muy buenas oportunidades laborales con las que en realidad soñaba incluso antes de empezar la maestría. Una de las cosas que aprendí en la maestría en vivienda es a no entender la vivienda de la forma tradicional, moderna, que es la compartimentación de los espacios domésticos, sino entenderla a partir de dinámicas familiares, de otros tipos de habitantes, una vivienda entre roomies, como es una vivienda para una abuela y su nieta. Un cambio que hubo en mí fue como una capacidad de sorprenderme en cosas que normalmente daba por sentadas. Mi nombre es Bettina Rincón y estudié la maestría de vivienda en CENTRO.
Definitivamente, después de haber estudiado diseño urbano, veo la ciudad de forma muy distinta. Veo sobre todo, pues, qué se puede mejorar, ¿no? Cómo cambiando pequeñas cosas podemos hacer una mejor ciudad. La ciudad siempre está cambiando y eso se tiene que reflejar en el urbanismo. Espacios en donde nos sintamos a gusto, en donde podamos convivir, cómo lo que ya está hecho lo mejoras, que motive a la gente a salir de su casa y realmente a generar comunidad. Soy Esteban y estudié la especialidad de diseño urbano en CENTRO.
Yo me quiero dedicar al desarrollo de viviendas sustentables, me siento muy feliz. Creo que sí estoy en la carrera correcta, definitivamente. Me encanta lo que hago, todas las cosas que he ido descubriendo de mí, de la gente a mi alrededor. Creo que lo que tiene que hacer la arquitectura es dejar de resolver por el camino fácil. Pues creo que podríamos aprovechar mucho mejor el agua, la energía solar, la luz natural, el calor natural, hacer de la naturaleza nuestro cliente principal.